Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Welcome, everyone, to the fourth meeting of the Precepts 23 group. We still have people joining us. I would like to start with just a few minutes of sitting, and others can join us, and then we'll begin our discussion for today. So please sit back in your chair, align your shoulders with your ears, align your shoulders with your hips. Allow your breastbone to rise with your breath, and imagine a string going up from the top of your breastbone up to the ceiling, or even up to the sky, and let that help you expand your chest and keep your breathing and your heart open while you sit. Now ring a bell, and I'll ring a bell at the end. Welcome to everyone. I see we have 28 participants besides myself. That's fantastic. And I see people in all parts of the world here. This is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to start by saying some thanks. I want to thank Rosemarie for being our online monitor today and for helping us be connected. And I see that there are some people in the Zendo. That's so interesting. Hi there. Shashi, is that you? I can't tell who it is. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, I want to say thank you to Asoka for sending out the very beautiful meditation on the Brahma Viharas that you shared a couple weeks ago. I actually used that this morning as part of a talk, and I sent you an email about it. If you haven't had a chance to read it and spend some time with it, it's a very beautiful, lyrical way of opening up connection with compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, and sympathetic joy, the four Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes, as they can be called. So some wondrous connections there. Today we'll be talking about the relationship between this precept, meeting people on equal ground, and how this can be elucidated by language from this group called the Right Use of Power Institute. And Dr. Peter Barstow and her colleagues, and the curriculum they developed originally for psychotherapists, and has later expanded well beyond this kind of professional practice to awareness of the way in which power affects personal relationships, and how personal relationships are based in social constructs that we all participate in and all kind of fight against at the same time. So I have a question for the beginning, just for, you don't have to write anything down or so on, but I'll just say, it used to be that I thought that power and arrogance were pretty synonymous, that power was a matter of arrogantly bossing other people around. And that's how I experienced it. And I had an overbearing older brother and an older sister, And then I went to work and I had to do what the boss said or else I would get fired, and those kinds of things. So it wasn't until about 10 or 12 years ago, encountering the right use of power, that I saw, or the curriculum for the right use of power, that I was able to understand Cedar Barstow's definition of power, which is the ability to have an effect. And before I go on, let me ask, did everyone get copies of the documents that I shared? Lisa Judge said that she had some trouble with the formatting of them, so I just resent them as separate PDFs just a few minutes ago. So it may not be possible to have those in front of you, but I will put something up on the screen later on. So I want to share a document. It'll take me a moment to get it up on the screen here. Just one second. Okay, I hope everyone can see this. This is the document called 3 Types of Power. And there's another document which called 5 Types of Power. It was a later version in which it was expanded beyond the original definitions. But the early work by Cedar Barstow and her colleagues was to describe what she called personal power. And I'm going to just briefly read through this list here of aspects of it. Personal power is our birthright. It is accompanied by the inherent human right to be treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. Personal power is always present, but we can be more or less aware of it and have more or less access to it. And when we have less access to it, we are more vulnerable to abuses of power from those in an up power role. The personal power can be limited by ourselves or by the misuse of power by others, but in most situations, we can retain some personal power through positive attitudes and self-respect. And it comes in many forms, including the power to communicate articulately, to have a presence that other people want, as they use the term charisma here, and creativity. Then Barstow defines role power or positional power. So it comes out, so I have role power because I am the official leader of this class, right? So I have the role power. And it's separate from personal power and is thus mutable. It can be withdrawn. It has to be, it is power that automatically accompanies any position of authority, but authority itself is something that is conveyed by mutual agreement. So it's not just a status, but it is a mutual agreement for sustaining role power. Role power carries an increased or expanded amount of power and responsibility, and it is integrated with personal power in the sense that role power needs to come from an authentic place of personal power, an authentic place of honesty and accountability as well. Some assigned roles carry greater increased power and responsibility than others. And in Cedar Barstow's expression, she's in the relationship for doctors and nurses and teachers and employers and so on. She says that the person in the up power role, the person in the down power role, say in personal power, has 100% responsibility for maintaining the openness of the relationship, but that the person in the up power role has 150% responsibility, watching out for their own actions and for the impact that the actions have on others. And there's a very important distinction that Dr. Barstow and others make between intention and impact. And when impact varies from intention. It is the role of the person in the up power role. It is the responsibility of that person to track the impact and to make sure that the impact matches the intention of what was planned from the beginning. So examples, you can see the list there: doctor, nurse, teacher, principal, employer, clergy, chairperson, therapist, social worker, coach, elected official, chief executive officer, professor, parent, body worker, police officer. So these are roles in which one will have access to more resources than the people you're interacting with generally. I mean, I gave the example when I was talking about arrogance before, of having to conform to the expectations of my employer, and the employer can terminate an employment, and on and on with those types of relationships. And then finally, there's status power in the umbrella of power that right use of power describes. And I want to start with actually the examples here, because these are largely invisible to us. But age, social class, wealth, celebrity, education, race, sexual orientation, nationality, gender, physical appearance, physical prowess, religious affiliation. These are things in which we are embedded, and we don't typically think of them as being about us, but being about the society, or about how we fit in with society. But in fact, they convey a great deal of power upon us in certain situations. And we can, if we have money, we can act differently to people who don't have money. And there are many, many examples in which status power can interfere with perceptions of role power and perceptions of personal power. And by clinging to status power, we can essentially blind ourselves to the impact of our actions. We can assume that things are the way that they are in our society, and that people of a certain age and a certain social class and certain educational attainment are ordained by God to be treated better than people who have a different levels of attainment, and so on. And that, again, what Cedar Barstow was talking about is being aware of the impact that these status powers convey on us, and what they communicate to others, even if we don't know they are being communicated. So any questions about that so far? So I'm going to stop this share and then open this other document. So the document here is an even further condensation of the material in the previous document. Role power, personal power comes in many forms, including awareness, communication, presence, and creativity. Can be limited by ourselves or others, or by the culture. But in most situations, we can retain at least a connection with our personal power. Role power being the next one, again, it is mutable and will come and go with the positions that we hold. And again, it will come and go with the level of agreement that we have with the people that we're dealing with. Status power is culturally conferred. It often goes unrecognized by those who hold it, and it is, in a very important sense, unearned in a way that that makes it different from role power. Role power has a kind of earned quality by arising out of consensus or agreement. Status power does not. And then there's collective power. And these are the two more recent additions. Collective power, power that comes from gathering personal, role, and status power from multiple sources to effect change toward a common or shared interest. It can manifest in many ways, such as power with or power over. And it is subject to both collective wisdom and collective folly. It necessitates collaboration and is centered on shared values. Examples of collective power include unions, support groups, hate groups. And then finally, systemic power is the widespread expression of collective power on an institutional, national, or global level, generated over time by people with up role and up status power. It manifests in structural ways and in ways that are largely or can be subliminal. It is derived from and perpetuates existing role and status power positions. It legitimates itself through history and the telling of history. And examples of systemic power include cultural norms, laws, policies, media conventions, and professional expectations. So I think I'm guessing that I began with a question about arrogance. What is arrogance? Why did I used to associate arrogance with power? I doubt that there's anybody here who would normally think of themselves or would explicitly embrace arrogance. There's a quote in Diane Rossetto's reactions about the precept from one of her students who writes, for example, I am good at letting people hear what they want to hear. So the practice for me of this precept becomes noticing when I am doing this and inquiring what might be behind some of that requirement. So she's implying a kind of manipulation of others by giving them what they want so that she ends up where she wants to be, right? I noticed more and more the need to be validated, the need to be liked, the need to be seen as having no faults, the investment I had in some people being perceived negatively, and so on. I measured myself accordingly. I also started seeing how, without directly saying something negative about someone else, the way I put something could lead the person I was speaking to draw some negative conclusions about someone else. Of course, this made me look better. It's all so subtle. I know I still miss a lot. Plus, I find it painful to see because it necessitates being aware that I did some harm, that I have an investment in people seeing that I do good. But I know it is a critical practice for me because this particular way of being is like the air that I breathe. It's so subtle and slippery. I sense that this practice is unraveling something, she says, at the cellular level. So this is, on the one hand, we have language that describes how we fit into society, how we connect with other people, how we have personal integrity, and we have the right to be treated fairly and honestly. Negotiating all those things with our psychobiology, as I wrote in the materials that I shared a couple of weeks ago, where we have a natural propensity to want to protect ourselves from harm and to feel that we are connected with others in ways that will be not only enjoyable now, but sustainable in the future. Those are very important parts of our daily lives, you know, and with our the way our biology and minds are structured. So it's very difficult to get away from something that is so subtle and slippery as wanting other people to like us and wanting to figure out where we stand in a social hierarchy. But we can do some harm by constantly measuring ourselves against others and particularly if we do so in ways that uh, that lead us to stay in our story, to stay in the story to the extent that we are missing the real people in front of us, the real people that we're dealing with, you know. So I've been going on and on about this for a while here. It's been about 20 minutes. I want to take a break and just ask for reactions to the materials that have been shared, what you think about these descriptions of power roles that the Right Use of Power Institute has promulgated, and whether you see any benefit to using this type of language to approach this precept. So anybody want to jump in on that? So Mary Beth, thank you for jumping in. How are you?
Yeah, so I have found just the definition. So thank you for these handouts, by the way. It was very, very helpful for me because I have found that just the simple act of me looking at the three areas, personal power, role power, and status power, in relation to other people and naming it for myself. Oh, okay, so this is the role power here, and this is status, and this is for personal power. It helps me to meet people on equal ground, because sometimes I'm in an up power role and sometimes I'm in a down power role. It just depends on the situation. And so I think the two work very well together for me, especially in terms of just naming and understanding that the equal ground part can be there even on an up power, even when I'm on an up power or I'm on a down power, if that makes sense.
Mary Beth, let me ask you, how is it that if you're in an up power role, how can you be on equal ground with the person in a down power role?
I mean, it's tricky. I think it's in the way that, for me, and I can speak of my experience, it's the way that I understand my role and know that it's just a role. We're still humans, we're still equal. I just might have a little bit more responsibility in a particular relationship or reaction, a relationship or activity at that particular moment. Did I answer your question?
You did. Thank you. That's very well said. I would add a couple of things that I got from reading. I've taken the course a couple of times with Cedar Barstow and so on, and recently just retook it, as a matter of fact. But one of the things that I would add to what you say is that a person in an up power role, I mentioned the extra responsibility for scanning, tracking for impact and so on, and making sure that your communication is clear, that your expectations have been made clear, and that you're in an appropriate way, and that and that you are responsible for your own self, that you're not getting sidetracked into other psychological issues, as can often happen, that have to do. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a sidetrack, but just that the communication be clear and direct and useful for both of you. That has something to do with accountability for the person in the up power role, and that to be accountable in that way is a way of being responsive and appropriate in an up power role. That's my understanding. Anyway.
No, and you articulated it very well. Yeah, I've had the same thoughts. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Shelley, hi.
Thanks, Joel. I work in a profession where I'm in an up power role. And my intention is always to not be my role, but to be me and to meet people on equal ground. And sometimes people don't see me, they see my role. And it doesn't matter what I do to try to help them to see me, to be on equal ground. If they've decided I am my role,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot seem to meet them in that relational space on equal ground, despite my best efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch and I'm tracking the interaction, but I find it really challenging when I can't really influence people to see me as me instead of my role. And it just makes me sad.
Thank you for sharing that. That is a real dilemma that you're pointing to, I think, and that uh, that because we have role power, because we have status power, and so on, that can be a barrier for other people, particularly if they are naive, as I used to be, and just regard anybody with any kind of role power as being arrogant, as I said before, you know, that's a mistake that they're making. When you make the effort to be transparent and to communicate clearly, do you find that has any reflecting it back to your own personal power and your own sense of yourself? Is it helpful for you to know I'm doing the best I can in this situation, even though I'm not getting the response that I was hoping for? So that's a way in which I think that this notion of personal power, and even in a relationship where there's a defined relationship of up power and down power, a person can withhold the agreement of the personal power to the up power person. You know, there's ways in which all these agreements are reciprocal and changing moment by moment, and that I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the acknowledgement of those relationships in an honest way can be very good. So, all right, Shelley, so you're unable to unmute. You wanted to say some more?
I just wanted to thank you for naming that. That was very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Rosemarie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Mary Beth in terms of, well, actually, it's your question, Joel. How do you treat people on equal ground when you're in the up power position? And well, you know, when you are in that position, you're still treating the person as an equal. In other words, well, my example is clear because I really failed in this, and that was when I have people doing things for me, like a handyman, for example. And what I noticed is, and English is not their first language, so there's some implicit bias in how I responded when they didn't understand right away what I was asking for. Mm-hmm. So I was clearly in an up power position, and I was very impatient, and they should have understood right away. So there was two levels there, I guess. There was the role power, and also you know, some implicit bias there that I noticed about myself. So that was a big lesson for me. Mm-hmm. So the power is not the issue, but how whichever place you are, that you're really treating this person, you know, equally as yourself. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemarie. That's it, you know, for people to give examples where they're not the hero of the story, where they did something wrong, that's bravery. Thank you for that, Rosemary. Thank you. Frances, can you unmute? I hope.
Yes.
Yes, good.
Well, what I was going to say, you said actually the last time you said it really well, but I was going to give an example. When I was still working, I was in an up power position, and I didn't realize that you can't really be in an up power position unless the people that you have power over are in agreement to that. You can assume your power position. I was going to give a concrete example. In my retired time, I have 2 grandsons, but my 10-year-old grandson is quite cheeky and quite independent. So the other day, I see them every day. So I was saying, okay, we're going to do this for a little while, and then we're going to go inside, and then trying. And he said, why do you get to tell us what we're going to do? I thought, well, why do I? It was an assumed power position that I had about myself that Levi wasn't necessarily buying into,
Yeah.
because he
Oh,
definitely sees himself as an equal with me.
Yeah.
But then that's kind of a funny kind of example with a child, but I can go right back and think to my professional years. And I think when you keep assuming your position of that up power, that's when it becomes arrogance.
And I will say that there's the distinction that Cedar Barstow and others make between role power, which comes from agreement and consensus almost, and status power, which is fragile and vulnerable. Your status power can be, we don't tend to think of it very much, but it's the sort of thing that somebody can turn to you and say, well, who made you the boss of everybody's schedule, you know?
And it can be used as a weapon, because you do have positional power then. And
Right.
often it's, I'll take your job away, or I'll take your privileges away. Or if you're the grandmother or parent, you can, go to timeout, or you can do something. But it still really is more of a perceived kind of power. Although in that role, you do have more weapons you can use to hurt someone.
Yes, indeed. Let me say, I want to call on Lisa and Susan and Genevieve, but then there's another question I want to ask, which is, in a down power role, how do you exercise your power in an appropriate way to meet others on equal ground? If you are in a job situation or a teaching relationship or something like that, in that down power role, how do you act in a way that you are meeting another person on equal ground, even if they have greater resources than you, even if they have authority to make changes that you would not have that same authority? I believe that there is a way to do that, and I would like to ask for a volunteer later on to jump on that one. So Lisa Judge.
Yeah. Well, to answer the question you just asked, guess the solution that I've come to in recent years is just to exercise kind of a joining energy in the moment with that other person, because I can notice that I'm talking with them, but I'm not joining with them, so that it does feel like that is easier to set up a power dynamic. This issue is just hitting to the heart of a lot that I've struggled with over the course of my life. First as a therapist, because I wasn't comfortable being in a power role with people, because you're working with someone, you're not working on someone. And
Mhm.
two, I've recently become president of the Homeowners Association Board. And that has just become torturous in terms of trying to understand how to collaborate with people at the same time to exercise an influence in situations where things are spiraling out of control to some extent. And I've had to just say, the last time this happened, I just said, I really try to encourage collaboration and the sharing of power, but I've got to pull rank here and set some boundaries because we're spiraling out of control and I'm about to, this can't continue sort of. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to acknowledge how difficult this is to, and I guess acknowledge that communication has again been sort of another, to keep in mind that I'm an influencer, not, and then to just, I really struggle. I mean, I can write an email 8 or 9 times before I send it just to make sure that it expresses what I want to say in a way that I don't think will offend someone, but will also be clear about what I want. So thank you for hitting on something that I'm glad we're talking about because I need help. Thank you.
I would say there's something, an important point also that Cedar Barstow and others make, which is that when you are in an up power role, people project things onto you. So the therapists know about this. It's called transference, right? That whatever people are struggling with, that they like to attach that to you, And I had the odd, right about the time when I first started taking the first class and working with Peg and others on right use of power, I was one Sunday leading I was a timekeeper at Appamana. In fact, Peg had given a talk. She had already left the room, and a member of the Sangha came, and like I said, I was just sitting there ringing the bells. And in the timekeeper's book at Appamana, there are instructions. After you finish ringing the bells and everybody else leaves, you do 3 bows, you put out the candle, and you make some adjustments on the altar. And a person came, and she was just being friendly, and she wanted to give me a hug while I was there. And I said, hang on, I've got to do this other stuff. I'll be right with you. And she got really mad at me. And because as I understood it from further reading, that when you are in the up power role, you get some things projected onto you, and then the slights that you do get amplified. What may seem unimportant to you can become very important to someone who sees themselves in a down power role.
Yeah.
So again, this has a lot to do with our relationships with other people and about meeting people on equal ground and just knowing where we are if we're in a power hierarchy like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Kaderka, hi there.
Hi.
There you go.
So the first thought that came to me was, the question of what serves life in a way, in any sort of use of power. But in particular, I started thinking that, or I was reflecting that, when I've been in this sort of up power role, which I've been in as a boss, what I've always tried to remember and try to convey, not always successfully, is a sense of, or I've tried to kind of embody, what is the larger purpose that we are both serving? So what is the mission of the organization, or what is the larger value, or what is the kind of life-serving value that we're collectively engaged in, and so to make whatever is going on sort of be going on in that context and not in the context of me personally, like not that a role of personal and I'm thinking of this mostly in terms of role power, but it is there is a difference, but to be trying to kind of keep us both focused, or keep all of us focused on kind of the larger purpose, which is So we're both sort of engaged in that. And you can sort of, even as a teacher, you're both engaged in education or the, kind of illumination of things or whatever, or you're a doctor, it's health or something. So there's something larger than my individual, power in a particular role. It's just where I happen to kind of be. So that's a way I like to.
Again, by the way, I used to work for Susan. She was my boss. She was a great boss. And I will say that from my experience, you were cognizant while you were keeping, this focus. You were also cognizant of where I was and my own personal integrity and my own personal, what I had to offer and what I working with me to see what I could do that we could agree upon that would be, in the service of this greater good. That was not about either of us exactly, but each of us had our personal relationship within that structure to work from. So does that seem like a fair statement?
I mean,
Well, okay. I mean,
I'm glad that was your
would you say
experience.
that is a fair statement of a good kind of up power, down power relationship?
Right, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Genevieve, hi.
Hi. I actually think that this is the most productive work we can do, is to start noticing how and when we are in an up power position, and how the dynamic of communication and power is between us and the other person. I don't know how any progress will be made unless people start noticing the ways in which there have been blind to their own empowerment over other people, and what kind of effects they can have on those people. Therefore, I don't think it's true that you can't have an up power position unless the down power position person is in agreement. Just to state an extreme example, if a Caucasian American police officer is arresting an African American man, that African American man is not in agreement with the fact that there are centuries of slavery behind us that formed the causes and conditions that we were formed by, and that police officer has all kinds of power over the arrestee. So I find it difficult. I can see how, let's say I'm in a position of status power over someone else. I can see how I can choose to treat that person with respect and dignity, but it's still my choice. They don't get to choose whether I treat them that way, right? So even if I'm doing it, they're not empowered to make that happen.
It's a subtle distinction, but I'm seeing a distinction between status power and role power.
I thought you would say that, but in my job, because I have chronic illnesses, I happen to have a job that pays decently and is flexible hours. And if I were to lose it, I could end up homeless because I wouldn't necessarily be able to get another job like that. Right. So it's not always the case that you're just in it by agreement. Sometimes those role positions involve somebody having, power over someone else's livelihood, and ability to get by.
Yeah. Thank you for a very powerful and true example. I just have another example that Susan was talking about, aligning with the greater good, in a kind of corporate situation. Well, lots of corporate situations demand that you read the mission statement and you do whatever the mission statement says. And you may hate the mission statement, You may think it's completely illegitimate. And the way in which management may be treating the mission statement can be something that, you know, denies your humanity. You know, that's a different, a less powerful example than the one you were giving, Janelle. But yeah, these are very important things. We've only got 9 minutes left. Or am I? No, we've got 39 minutes left. Okay, thank you. Whew. All right. I want to be able to do an exercise, or it doesn't show here. Okay. But I want people to do some actual moving around with the activity called Power Parameters Self-Reflection. So we need to turn to that in 10 more minutes in order to have time to do that and to be able to talk about the effects of it. Clayton?
Yes, you were asking about down power. So I'll just quickly, I'm in a down power relationship all the time with my editors as a freelance writer, and it's exhausting because I'm always having to figure out this new relationship, and it's mostly on email. So I'm always open to wise words on how to manage my relative lack of power in relationship with these editors. But I really like what Susan said about what serves life. And I have to, when an editor says, okay, we're cutting this whole first part that you worked, well, they don't say that you worked so hard on, but I will have worked really, really hard. They say they're taking it out. I have a fit emotionally. And my key is to have all that ego-focused emotion and privately, and like go for a walk or talk to a friend, and then come back when I'm clearer, because I can't let my ego and my emotions get in the way of what serves this project. And it just takes a lot of discernment, and it's hard, but it's also, I think practice comes in a lot, and just helping me try to figure out how to fight for what I want and let go of what is not worth fighting for. And it's a constant struggle, and I'm really glad I have a practice, and that I don't send off an email right away with my first reactions, but I take time and breathe and go away and then come back.
I was once a freelance writer, Clayton, and I often thought to myself about editors, oh, so my story is the blank canvas on which you will create your masterpiece. You know, I mean, that's the way I reacted to editing and so on. And that's a very painful position to be in, where you have worked hard on something and it can just be dismissed, you know, or treated in ways that seem less than respectful. That's my heart goes out to you. That's what I'm trying to say. I will say also, I'm going to jump in on the answer to my question that I raised before about what are some ways in which, in a down power role, you can address issues related to meeting people on equal ground. And so I used to work in a situation where I had a very contentious relationship with one of my bosses. I had many bosses, but there was a particular one that I felt like I was in a defensive crouch all the time in relation to this person. And I talked about it quite a bit with Peg and Flint in practice discussion and so on. It was a very important relationship to me, and one in which I felt I had no power. And what Peg in particular showed me was that I did have power in the sense of maintaining my own integrity and in not just going with the story that I had about this person. You know, to me, this person was abrupt and difficult and vengeful and all kinds of stuff. But Peg reminded me that in the moment that I could see that this was a person who was sitting in a chair just like me. And to remember that he had people looking over his shoulder for the success of the program and was being measured all the time in the same way I was being measured all the time. And that we shared many things. And that's why I chose the exercise from the Anchored book that I shared several weeks ago, which goes, you know, along the lines of, like me, this person wants to be accepted. Like me, this person fears being rejected, you know, like that. That to me, at least in my own personal experience, that's been the way of negotiating from a down power role to up power roles in difficult situations, is to remember the common humanity and the shared aspirations that we have, even if it's somebody that I'm having a fight with, or that, you know, seems to want to put his thumb down on me, you know? So does that make sense to you, Clayton?
Yes, that is very helpful. And I will think about that because I do try to do that. And if I'm feeling a little hungry and in need of some affirmation, I remember that they are too. So I'll say something really great about what they edited to remind me it's not to focus on the thing that I feel like they're making worse, and remember all the things they're making better. And then it feels more of like a collaboration. But I love what you said. Thank
Where it
you.
can feel like a collaboration.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that is yourself acknowledging your own personal power and integrity in that moment, right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Becky, hi.
Hi. Well, you just used the word I was going to use, collaborate. It was at Apamata early on, and I don't remember if it was you, Joel, or if it was Kim or who I was having a conversation with, and it helped me recognize my pattern about what I do in relationship to work situations and the up and down roles, because I had the freedom that comes with working with nonprofits that I believed in what they were doing. And so that was a starting place. I only applied for jobs that were down power roles because I really didn't feel I could handle the kinds of stuff that I have seen and have participated in reactivity to someone in an up power role. So what I did was try to find all of the ways that I could best collaborate with the boss person and to really make as many offerings as I could about the way that she or he could make that even stronger. I just, was right in there behind it with, the files you needed and the whatevers kind of things. And then also willing to make suggestions about how it could be better. And that was good. But mostly those roles also had for me an up power role as well, because I was often working with either the volunteers or the clients of our program as well. And so I had both aspects of that going on. So in that case, part of what I always did was share what I saw in myself that was something, and use my own experience to speak to. And it's something that I hadn't like realized as a pattern until somebody asked me about what work I had done and, you know, all of that. So it was a really interesting thing then to see what that was and why it sometimes worked and sometimes didn't.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So do you, and again, in terms, I mean, I think of you as someone who is very acute about understanding the relationships, what makes a relationship on equal ground? Do you find, you know, on reflection from what you were just describing, are you at peace with the mode of activity that you have had in the past and that you have now in terms of meeting people on equal ground?
Overall, but I also have a few things that I wish I had had a better take on it while it was happening, but did the best I could under the circumstances.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And part of what you were saying is true here too, is I came to the assisted living and I'm in the down power position here. But what I have done right from when I got here was to say, I see what you're doing and how hard it is.
Mhm.
While also talking about, I see what I'm doing and what you're helping me do and how hard that is.
Mhm.
So to be able to look at it from both directions, I think is a useful process in itself.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so it is 2 minutes after the hour.
So I just wanted to ask if Ed, I know you had your hand up before. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh,
Well, I see that we do have a time issue, and
go ahead, please do. I didn't see your hand before, sorry.
I took it down because I was looking at the time thing, and I didn't want to, you know, have us not get to something that was important in here also. But and some of it's just an iteration of some of the things that have been said, but the whole structure, the whole concept, everything is so complicated, so nuanced, and it's something that has dynamic fluidity to it. You know, in the corporate world, we always said you put together a document for operations, but it's a living document. It changes over time and over use and who's involved with it. And the whole thing with power, like Genevieve brought up a very, very important point. And you had made a reference to it also in a particular way, Joel, where, you know, everyone should look, we all need to look at our mission statement. But, you know, and in relation to something that Genevieve said, there's times when no one's sharing the mission statement, or there is no mission statement, or people have put themselves or others in a position where you don't have access to the mission statement, and you're not being allowed to learn to read. So how you actually get a right use of power becomes a real quandary, or it becomes something that's a non sequitur, something that can't get done. And one of the things that I, you know, like in a situation like that with the police, there is no such thing as an equal. And in realistic term, what happens is whether you understand the right power or not, you still have a role there, and your role becomes the role of a contributor, where what you contribute to that, not as an equal, but as someone who is non-contrary. So your role is just not to be a source of irritation, or a source of rebellion, or a source of conflict, but you still can't exercise power or intelligence or information. And even looking at that on at a corporate level, there were times when, because there are people who, you do have roles, you do have responsibilities. I would always say for people working with me is, my best intention is that we work together, okay? And there are things that, in terms of, instead of using the terms equals, I said we're contributors, and we're all equal as contributors, but someone might be able to contribute something in more specific or better fashion than I could because you know more, you have more experience. But then we also need to understand that there will be, by necessity, situations where someone has to make a decision and be accountable for the decisions. And that's when, it's not equals, but it's that person who has, in what we're calling the up power position, has that accountability to make that decision and be accountable for the consequences of that decision for yourself and for the other people working with you. And asking for understanding and agreement to do that, to work together, but also to understand where there has to be times where someone has to take a different level of accountability than someone else might be. And if you don't want to participate or feel that's not viable, because there are such things as built-in biases for this whole thing, whether it's power related or sociological, or people who don't want to who have different communication platforms that they want to work off of. So there's just so much that sometimes it works one way, sometimes it works a different way with all of the power structures, and being able to understand where you fit into that role on a fluid basis is extremely important and sometimes extremely difficult. And that was my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Ed. And I'm sorry, I was muted before, so thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else with hands raised or anything at this time. All right, so I'm going to share the screen for just a moment, and I want to suggest an activity that will take, well, let's see, it's 8 minutes after the hour. So let's spend 15 minutes on this. And does everyone? Well, I don't know how to, I'm not being able to shrink this on my screen right now, but can everyone see power parameters, self-reflection? And I hope you have copies of this, or a copy of it on your own computer. What I want to suggest is that we break up into breakout rooms. Let's see, I can't see right now how many people we have. 2 people each, and that each group of 2 choose, say, 3 of these items. It doesn't matter which ones, just whichever ones you can agree on, and that you do the following activity. So for example, the first one, there's for personal and role power, are you more comfortable being directive or responsive? And the way that Cedar Barstow came up with for experiencing this is literally experiential. Imagine that there's a line to your right and to your left, and if you move to the right, you are moving toward, you're kind of situating yourself where you feel most where you feel most comfortable on that continuum. And so you're going to be doing this with another person, and you might be narrating it to the other person as you're doing it. So you're sharing your responses on this. Or directive, you may be someone who feels comfortable being directive in certain situations where that's necessary, and you're imagining yourself into that situation. But something else you can do is not just go stand in a place that is on that line, but change, move toward, if you're naturally more directive, move toward being responsive and see what that feels like. See what it feels like in your body. So is that clear at all? I hope. So imagine you're going to be standing up and you're going to be moving on a line that is related to each of these poles that shows up in this document. And I'm going to see if I can bring a few more of them up on the screen here. So
Joel, just to clarify, you actually want us to physically stand up, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So, and
We-
again,
When we pick 3,
two, let's say, well, okay, so let's make it 2 for now to give us time to come back. We can't do them all, but just pick some that grab you. Vulnerable and invulnerable. That's a good one. And you want to get up and move and see how it feels in your body as you move toward one pole and toward another pole, and report that out loud to your partner in your breakout room. Okay? This is a very powerful exercise. It may not seem like much right now, but it can be really great. This, as an exercise, it sure is a lot more effective if you are in a room with other people, moving up and down an imaginary line and expressing, oh, I'm moving toward the part where I project blame. I'm starting to have a bad feeling about that. And now I'm going to move to the part where I accept blame. And wait, should I be blamed for everything? Why those thoughts are coming up, those kinds of things. And like I say, it's just a lot easier if you're actually in a room with other people instead of talking through the ether. Mary Beth, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I did it by myself here in my room. I just started at the top and started doing it. It was fascinating. So thank you, because I'm gonna practice it more. Because I did feel myself, especially in directive. I'm a very directive person, but I felt myself as I walked, the responsive side, I just started, it felt like I was putting on a pair of clothes that didn't fit, And so, and then I went down to a couple more, and I don't know if it means anything because I haven't taken the course or read the book, but I tend to be on this left side of the paper. And I don't know if people tend to be on one side or the other, or so I just wanted, those were my observations.
Mm-hmm. Any reactions to that? Anybody who felt that they were on the right side of the paper as opposed to the left side of the paper? So Jess texts and says, I was more on the right side. I'll say I tend to be more on the right side.
Did I say something, Joel?
Yes, Lisa.
Except for on the left side, the project blame, all of these, both the left and the right side, all of these seem to have value as long as we can be flexible and accommodate to a situation so that we don't get stuck and always being task focused, which I tend to do, or directive, but that we flow as needs be along the continuum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Really, that's true. It's really true. And it's good to be able to explore as an experience, moving around and ending up where you feel, as Mary Beth said, it's like wearing clothes that don't fit, and it's not a common experience to be able to move around in that way, where it's low stakes and yet a serious exploration, So I love these exercises. And there are many, many more that you have access to through the Right Use of Power Institute website. You can watch their videos. You can look at their offerings. All you have to do is sign up. You will then be on their email list and get 1 or 2 emails a day for the rest of your life, maybe. But it's free. You don't have to pay to access the materials. So, Serenity.
One of the things that I was reminded of in looking at the list is sort of the yin and yang balance, but all the things are relative. So there is a relationship between them, and you could have, you know, if you had a third thing or a different thing, it wouldn't necessarily be one place or the other. And it's about having the energy to do the dance, to move between them as the circumstances require.
No, that's a huge point. The energy to do the dance. Yeah. Right. Rosemarie, so we're just at the end of our time, and there's one paragraph I'd like to read before we go. So, but Rosemarie.
Oh, just real quick, I just wanted to second what both Lisa and Serenity were saying about the continuum and the dance, because otherwise you could look at this as a duality, and I think one kind of stay away from that. You know, different circumstances obviously require different things. So thanks. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, well, this is so exciting for me. All the things that people had to say, I'm so appreciative of stepping forward with energy and engaging so fully with the material that we had in this chapter. It's really great, and I hope it's helpful to you. So here's a concluding paragraph from Diane Rossetto, which you've no doubt read already, but she says, that's what our practice with this precept offers us. The opportunity to truly experience perfection as neither better nor worse, bigger nor smaller than anything else in the universe. And then slowly, over time, inquiring into and slowly deconstructing our patterns of measuring ourselves against others, we can have moments when we truly meet each other on equal ground. Like the Buddha advises, don't believe this because I say it or because you read it in a book. Believe only your own experience. That's why we practice. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of tenacity to do this kind of work. It isn't something we can learn by listening to a talk or just believing it. We have to get up and move around. And I'm sorry, I'm extemporizing here. We have to move. We have to work with other people, and to meet them on equal ground means letting go of our stories, listening, being kind, being responsive, and being truthful, even when that may lead to disagreement. So I want to thank you so much for this wonderful afternoon. And our next chapter will be chapter 8, which is about, I've got it printed out here. Well, I don't have it printed out here. What's the next chapter? Anyone have that in front of them? Is it maintaining a clear mind? Sorry?
Cultivating a clear mind.
Cultivating a clear mind. Okay. So let's work on that. I'll have many more extra pieces to share over the next month. And I'll see you in June, if not before. Thank you.